Welcome back to the Adonai gameplay animation workshop. Today we're gonna be looking at how we can blend different types of animations using animation montages and default slot. So the first thing you need to know is the difference between an animation and an animation montage and the way you can create animation montages. So for instance, we're using this particular animation. It's called Reload Rifle Iron Sight. And while this is an animation, like you can pause, play, add notifies to it and everything, something that you cannot do is overlay this on top of other animations and have it blend. And the way you usually do that is by having something like a animation montage. The way you create an animation montage is you right click your particular animation, go to create, and then create an animation montage. Okay. The difference between an animation montage and an animation is basically that you can put these in slots. Slots are basically categorizing if you want your animation to be sorted out on what kind of layer. So basically, it's a way to say that the upper body layer is going to be overriding the base pose. We're going to get to that in a second. Also, the base animations can be blended together, and we have done that before, but that is using a blend space. It's not using actual physical code. It's just using a blend space. Okay. So once you create an animation montage, the things that you can do is you can go to the slot manager. You can add slots if you feel like you need multiple slots. So if you want your hand animation to be different compared to your hand animation compared to your body animation, so you can have different slots for each of them, and then overlay that on the base pose itself. Okay, so now that you have this slot set up, what you need to do is make sure the animation blueprint is also reading it correctly. So let's go to our animation blueprint really quick. And this isn't going to be in the event graph. It has nothing to do with the event graph. It's just going to be in the anim graph. So earlier on, we had just this connected to the output pose. So what we've instead done is we're trying to store this base movement in like we're trying to take a screenshot of it, and then we're going to use that as a base layer, and then on top of it we're going to keep adding stuff. So just like Photoshop, you can have a background and then you put a plant on top of it, and then if you want flowers, then you put that on top of the plant in a layer. It's the same thing, but instead it's with 3D animations. So the way you take the screenshot is basically known as saving a cached pose. Once you do that, it's going to give you a random name. So make sure you go ahead and change that. I already changed it to something called lower body pose. So now once I have this lower body pose, I can go ahead, right click and figure out, right click and then bring it back again. And then we can use this as our necessary step to continue. Okay, once you have your lower body pose, what you're trying to do is we're trying to override it, or like overlay. So put a layer on top of it with the default slot, because our animation is on the default slot, right? And once we do that, we are storing it as the upper body. This is only for convenience, so we can plug it in for the blend pose. If we wanted, we could directly plug this into the blend pose too, and that would totally work. But it's for later on when we're gonna be using multiple layer blends and we're gonna need multiple upper bodies, things like that. All right. So now that you have your two variables, the lower body pose, which is the background layer basically with of the animations, and then the default slot, which is the upper body animations, we're gonna blend them together based on a function known as layer blend per bone. So let me go ahead and create a brand new one, layered blend per bone. So when you click on it, you can see there's two inputs and only one output. The output animation pose goes to the output pose. And you can have multiple of these in a row. And then there's two things, the base pose and the blend pose. The base pose refers to the initial background or the animation you want to be overlain over. And then the blend pose would be the new animation that you want to portray over the base pose. So when you click on it, you need to expand your layer setup and then expand 0, which is the first array element, and then click on the plus sign. This is going to give you another 0th element of the array where you can pick the bone. So make sure when you're blending the bones, you have the bone names copy pasted instead of trying to write it down properly, because these are case sensitive, and if you mess it up, then it will be a whole host of issues, because it wouldn't give you an error, but you just wouldn't be able to resolve it. So yeah, so you just copy selected bone name, go ahead and then just paste it. Okay. All right. And then finally comes the blend depth. What this is a scale from 0 to 10 based on how much of the skeleton you want to blend it with. So at let's say if it was 0, then it would be completely doing the blend pose, right? And if it was 10, then it would completely be doing the base pose. So that's how it works. So you want to pick a number between 0 and 10 based on your needs. And you can play around with it in the animations itself and check it out and see what suits you better and what doesn't. Okay. Basically, 0 to 10 is going to be based on how many bones the Unreal is trying to categorize. So it's taking a percentage of the bones all the way till pelvis, which would be 5, and then all the way to the head, which would be 10. So 0, 5, and then 10. And then it blends it accordingly. Okay, now that you have the default slot set up, and then you have the base pose going into lower body pose going into the upper body pose, then lower body layers to the upper pose, your animation should be working. So the last condition that's left is to have your R button, because we're using reload, plug that in directly to the reload animation. I also have a branch for the prone one. We didn't do this in class, but it was just a short little thing to add because the prone animation was acting a little funky. So now once I go ahead and play, like I can run around and still use the reload animations and they work fine. I can sprint and also use the reload animation and then they still work fine. Okay, if I do prone, we have the prone animation set, but this is something I set up on after class. But yeah, the main purpose is that you can blend animations together. So like you can be strafing and still reload. And Unreal tries to blend it using the layer blend per bone on the animation loop. That's all we did for today.